welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robinsoff, and I'm here with Pastor Joseph Tillman, MDiv, soon to be D-Man. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm
Cool.
actually doing really well.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, we're making it through the New Year's, and we're, a week or so beyond that now, and so yeah, man.
Still going.
So we're still going. We're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hasn't gotten too bad yet.
No.
2024.
No, I hadn't gone completely down the crapper yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Right.
But there's still time.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of time.
Well, today we're talking about sloth.
Well, that'll be something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Today we're talking about sloth, and it's going to be really, really good.
I can tell you're going to keep that energy level up real high today.
7 deadly sin, number sloth.
Number sloth.
Yep.
Okay.
Which is a weird word,
All right.
apparently.
It's kind of a weird word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm too tired to think about it.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll keep the energy up for both of us.
Yeah.
How about that?
Really don't want to be doing this today.
Or any day?
Just don't want to do it. Do you think you could just answer the questions by yourself so I can go back to bed?
You want me to ask myself the questions?
Yeah.
And then answer them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, I can do that.
Yeah. Anyway, sloth. Yeah. Go to Patreon, $5, like and subscribe, share, comment, follow, download, tell friends about the show. That's what I have to do for the beginning, right?
That's it.
That's all?
That's all.
Thank God. Cool. So first question is, what is sloth?
All right. What is sloth?
What is sloth?
Okay. So I think
I understand that it's a bear monkey thing,
right,
but
so...
what is
all right.
the sin?
Okay.
One.
So, right, there is an animal
Mm-hmm.
called a sloth
Mm-hmm.
that originates like Central South America,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a bear or a monkey.
Mm-hmm.
It's more along the armadillo family.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not what we're talking about today.
Mm-mm.
Talking about sloth
Mm-hmm.
as a deadly sin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And you're asking, what is that?
Yeah.
All right. So to be slothful,
Mm-hmm.
okay, is to be lazy, to be undependable, to have disinclination to action or to work. And then on this kind of spiritual part of it, just like spiritual apathy and inactivity.
So I'm lazy and don't hang out with Jesus enough.
Yeah, both those things could be considered slothful.
Does the Bible ever talk about slothfulness?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does. All right. So in Proverbs 6, verse 6, all right, it says, "Go to the ant, you sloth," or some translations will even say like you slacker. Go to the ant and observe its ways and become wise. Without leader, administrator, or ruler, it prepares its provisions in summer. It gathers its food during harvest. How long will you stay in bed, you sloth, or you slacker? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest, and your poverty will come like a robber, your need like a bandit. And so in Proverbs, there's actually, about 8 different Proverbs beyond this one that speak to the idea of being slothful.
So who wrote Proverbs?
Solomon. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which is interesting because
he was a very busy man.
He was in some ways, and then he wasn't in others. And so I think he actually became maybe a little slothful toward the end of his life. It definitely became slothful in regards to the things of the Lord.
So was this before he did all that or after? Okay.
Yeah. And then you also see the noun form of this again in Proverbs, like verse 9 or chapter 19, verse 15. And there's, again, Proverbs 15:19, Proverbs 19:24, Proverbs 21:25, Proverbs 22:13, 24:30, 26:13, all speak of slothfulness. And a lot of times it's in contrast to the idea of what it is to live a righteous life or to live a life that is not foolish.
Okay.
And so, or I guess in this case, if you're living a slothful life, that would be living a life that is foolish. And then the New Testament speaks on it as well. And it speaks on it in a couple of different ways. So the author of Hebrews in chapter 6, verse 10, and we'll actually start in not verse 10, but we'll start in verse 11. Now we desire each of you to demonstrate the same diligence for the full assurance of your hope until the end, so that you won't become lazy or slothful, but will be imitators of those who inherit the promises through faith and perseverance. So in the New Testament, you actually see this connected with the idea of not being lazy spiritually, not being lazy in pursuing the Lord and in loving others.
Why is sloth a sin?
All right, so a few things come to my mind actually when I was looking at this question, why is sloth a sin? So the first is that it actually just goes directly against God's creative design for us.
So we're supposed to be super busy all the time.
Didn't say that, but God did design us to be able to work. Like that's part of our original design.
Okay.
And so in Genesis chapter 1,
so is all this in the context of working?
Yes.
Like what is
working?
Work
like to work and to care for those that, I mean, like, so for example, if I'm a parent, I can't be slothful in raising my kids.
Okay.
In other words, so if you want to label that in the realm of work, you can.
Okay.
But in other words, we have responsibilities that need to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And when we choose not to do those responsibilities, that's being slothful.
Okay.
So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, it said, God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth. So the idea of ruling the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky. So from point 1, God has given us the capacity to be able to work, to oversee. And so, for example, Adam and Eve were to be caretakers of the garden they were given, they were placed in. And so
we had to work even when everything was perfect.
Correct.
Oh.
Everything just became.
So are we going to have to do work in heaven?
Everything
just sit around and eat grapes?
Is that what you're wanting to do? Is just sit around and eat grapes? It's not really like that.
Oh.
Now, you're in a perfect world and in a perfect garden, and so Adam and Eve's caring of it is not toilsome. That was part of the curse for Adam in Genesis 3, was that his work now was going to become very laborsome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Where before it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's another aspect of this in Ephesians 2, verse 10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time for us to do. And so being slothful is a sin in one way, in the sense of when we're not actually working and doing the things that God had created us to do, designed us to do, purposed for us to do, then we're missing the mark on that.
Okay.
And that's sin. So we're missing the mark on that. The other aspect of it, of being slothful, being as a sin, is that many times if we're slothful, it becomes a sin because we then begin to depend on others to provide for our basic needs.
Okay.
And thus, it really becomes unloving toward others. Romans 12, for example. And I know I'm giving a lot of passages today, but it really was kind of amazing how much this kind of stirred in me, actually. But anyway, Romans 12, verse 10. Love one another deeply as brothers and sisters. Take the lead in honoring one another. Do not lack diligence and zeal. Be fervent in the spirit. Serve the Lord. And so that idea of do not lack diligence is actually the idea of do not be lazy. Do not be slothful in zeal, but be fervent for the Lord. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in affliction. Be persistent in prayer. Share with the saints in their needs. Pursue hospitality. And so this all comes out of loving one another deeply as brothers and sisters. So when we're being slothful, when we are making the choice, the decision to not work, then we need others, or we're depending on others to provide for us our basic needs.
Okay.
And so, and obviously the nuanced part in this is that we're not talking about those that are not working because of, disabilities of any kind. We're talking about those that are choosing not to work.
When they can.
Okay. When they're fully capable, able to. And they're choosing not to work to provide for themselves or their family. They're choosing not to take care of their own kids. Therefore, they're dependent on others to take care of their kids for them.
Okay.
All of those things are indicative of one who's being slothful. And
I feel like there's a whole lot of other nuances. Like a million nuances to this.
And we were talking before the show, like this was actually the hardest one for me.
Okay.
Because all the others are like clear-cut actions that you're doing. Like, in other words, the other deadly sins. Mm-hmm. They were like, all right, don't covet. Well, what does that look like? Don't lust. Well, what does that look like? They're very clear. This one is more like an omission.
Right.
And instead of an action, like, in other words, you're just not doing an action.
Well, and the thing is, like, you could always spend 5 more minutes working.
Sure.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so okay.
Yeah, so we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Let's get to that. We'll get to that. Let me hit one more part of where it's sinful. All right? Okay. So it's sinful because we're going against God's design, His creative order of us when we're being slothful. It's sinful because we are now dependent on others instead of being able to be individuals that are not only caring for ourselves and others, or ourselves and our family, but we would have the capability to care for others as well. And then third, to be slothful in our relationship with the Lord is also a sin or missing the mark.
Okay.
And that was even in that passage there, do not lack diligence in your zeal for the Lord. And so when we're slothful in our relationship with Jesus, that itself is a sin.
Sloth feels like it is part of other problems.
Okay.
Or it can be.
Sure.
Like, if I'm a drunkard, then I'm going to be slothy the next day.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
So, is this a sin all by itself? Like, is there a switch in me that I need to flip to not be slothful? Or does this always come on because of other problems that I have?
Okay. Yeah. So using your example there of someone who's a drunkard and therefore being slothful because of that, you're connecting it with something. Same thing with like individuals that have depression.
Right.
Right. They're going to naturally be slothful because of their depression. And so I think that their alternate can be paired with something, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Like, in other words, that it can be an action just by itself, by, again, one choosing to just not work or to not care for, their own kids, and therefore have to depend on others to meet those needs. So I think that, yes, it can be connected to some things, but it doesn't have to be connected to those things. I think sometimes it's like, sometimes it can be also what we have seen around us, right?
Like how we observe other people
living. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And if that looks like a normative state, then we may just simply follow along in that normative state.
Okay.
But again, I don't think so that's what I'm saying. I don't think it has to be attached to some other thing like depression, or which is nuanced in and of itself, or drunkenness or anything like that.
All right, so how sloth am I allowed to be?
Okay.
Like, this is the nuances question
Okay.
that we mentioned earlier.
Right.
Like, there's a million things to going into how much I work versus don't work.
Yep.
Like, me compared to someone that just had 8 children at the same time.
Right.
One of those
Yes.
rabbits. Like, I'm very lazy compared to that person.
Okay.
Like, extremely.
Okay.
Because those people probably never stop doing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be right.
And yes, so that.
Okay.
But also, like I said, I could always work for 5 more minutes.
Sure.
And not have to do 5 minutes the next day.
Yep.
Or so how do I know, or how do I know within myself that I am sloth?
Okay.
Like, and how would I know that? And yeah.
All right. So obviously, you use your example of like comparing yourself versus a family that now has, multiple newborns at one time. Obviously, they're going to be working like crazy nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because they're going to have if they're working, they're actually working at jobs, their own jobs to make money. They're coming home and caring for all the kids and everything else. I don't think we need to get into a comparison thing.
Okay.
All right. I don't think we can compare ourselves to others. I think if we can provide for ourselves and our family, so we pay the bills, we have food on the table, and we're working for that, then you're not being slothful. Okay.
Okay.
Now there will be others that will say, well, you could work harder, and you could work harder to get promotions, to earn, work more hours, to have more money. Okay. But if you're sitting there going, but I'm okay with just the fact that I can provide for myself and my family without having to take the promotion, without having to work the extra hours, then okay, that's a choice you're making.
Is that sloth?
No.
Why not?
Because the goal is not how much can I work. That's never been like the idea. I think we have a very Americanized idea of like hard work is this incredibly high value, and hard work often looks like working a whole lot of hours. Okay. And so therefore, if you go work a whole lot of hours, you're not being slothful in some people's minds. Okay. But if I'm able to work the hours that, let's say I'm able to work, the 40 hours a week and I can provide for my family, great.
So
if I can work 30 hours a week, provide for my family.
That was my question.
Yeah. Then great.
Okay.
And so now I think a lot of it
What
depends.
if I have to work 50 hours a week, but I don't?
You have to?
Yes.
To be able to provide?
Yes.
And then you just choose not to?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you probably need to.
Okay, what if I have to work 80 hours a week, but I don't?
But you don't.
To provide.
I would say we need to have a conversation about how you're, why do you need to work the 80 hours? How much are we making per hour? Those kind of things. I think that's a broader conversation. So I don't want to get into a locked thing of going, well, it has to be this many hours. I think we know.
Trying to get there.
I know you're trying to set these lines. What I'm trying to say is, as long as we're providing for ourselves and our family, like we're meeting our needs, that's great.
Okay.
And I think so much of this that's what I was saying about America. I mean, the value of hard work and that kind of thing. Even in America, we're seeing a split of this because you've got, in other words, I believe, an older generation that really values this hard work, that really values putting in the hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking you to work 60, 70 hours a week, no brainer, go do it. Okay?
And they don't want to innovate.
Well, I'm not going to touch that one. But then you have another group that's going, well, I don't want to work that many hours.
Right.
I was raised by parents that worked like that, and I don't want to work like that. Therefore, I'm just going to choose not to. I will work less hours. But in so doing, you also have to understand, so therefore we may not have some of the same things that those that worked all those hours were able to have. There's a trade-off in there.
We're never going to have the same things.
Well, yeah. All right. I can't wait to talk further about what's going on in our country later on. But anyways, and I mean like in another episode. But I think that...
Are we gonna?
Oh, we're going
Are
to.
we ever going to do that?
Oh, we're going to.
What does that have to do with Jesus, though?
I think it has a lot to do with Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just...
In a worldview. Biblical worldview.
So what would that be called? Whatever. We can figure it out.
All right. But here's what I'm getting to. So like...
I was trying to do more work.
So for example, you've got some countries, and when they start work, let's say at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have a tea break at 10:15, 10:30. It's going to last half an hour.
What time is it right now?
Not time.
Okay.
Tea break. So, and then, they're going to have, then they'll work a couple more hours, have lunch,
Mm-hmm.
maybe work another hour or two, have another tea break.
Cool.
And then maybe work another hour. Mm-hmm. After that, half an hour, whatever, and they're done for the day. And we might look at that as Americans go, well, that's lazy. That's being slothful. And they're only going to work 5 days a week, right? Mm-hmm. And we may look at that and go, that's being slothful. And they're going to say, that's normal for us.
Okay.
We're able to provide for our families. We may not have the largest, retirement plans or 401ks, but this is what we're choosing to do. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you honor that.
We're also going to die at 50, so who cares?
That's, maybe. And so, but in a lot of those cultures that are like that, you've got like the multi-generational like living situation.
Right.
And so in other words, I think that's a direct impact for us, right? Because we feel like we need to have enough money saved up for retirement, In a lot of other countries, their retirement is moving in with their children, and the children are expected to care for them at a certain age, at a certain point. And so those are normative things.
Nobody does that in America anymore.
Oh, God, no.
No. There's a place down the street.
That's right. You go live there.
I'll come on Saturday.
Yeah. I say that. I actually know a lot of people who have elderly parents living with them in their home.
Okay.
So I really can't say that to be true. But because
those lazy, slothful elderly people.
All right now. Mm-hmm. Don't be calling grandma slothful. All right. So.
Just sucking on the younger generation.
I can't right now with you. All right. So that's what I'm kind of getting to, this idea of like, what is slothful? I do think it is so often based on expectations within the country or culture you live in. I mean, there's some countries like, man, they're giving like a month off from work.
Yeah.
Like just, you got this month off, don't work for June. Don't work in July, whatever.
Yeah. But that's because they pay like 50% of their income in taxes.
Correct.
Yeah. So someone's working.
Well, and they're working, and that's what that country has decided. That's how they're going to go about it.
America.
America's working.
Yeah.
All the time.
Jeez. Team America, World Police.
But I do think that's why you can have this generational divide in America too, of the younger generation going, man, we don't want to work like that.
We're going to get a lot of comments on this one.
We are.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are going to be like, yes. Yeah. And the other people are going to be like, you lazy.
Yeah.
And
we're not being lazy.
Oh, we're not lazy. We're doing this. We're working.
Yeah.
This is work.
We're not being lazy, but we're talking about people being lazy.
Right. Those suckers.
Ooh.
All right. So.
Wow.
But like there needs, anyways, I could talk about this till the cows come home, but
okay, so whatever.
Okay.
Yes, other countries look lazier than us, but I live here.
You do
in America.
Uh-huh.
So how do I know based on how much work that we have to do in our lives,
Right.
whether I'm being slothful or not.
Okay.
So how do I know that?
I think, to be honest with you, I think if you're going out there and you're working and doing your best to provide,
Okay.
you're not being slothful.
Okay.
Because the reality is, Nate, that there are people. Right, well, I guess what I'm thinking about like the single mom who is out there working like crazy.
I had a single mom.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't have two of them.
Just had one.
Mm-hmm. One single mom.
But your dad.
I also
was
had one
there.
single dad.
Right. All right. Well, for everyone else in the world that knows what I'm talking about, but Nate, so I'm thinking about that mom who is single, raising kids, and is having to work multiple jobs, right? And sometimes even then isn't able to meet all the needs.
Mm.
Is that person being slothful? Is it because they can't meet all their needs? No, they're working. So I think the biggest point is probably in all this is like, man, are you putting your best foot forward to work, to provide, to do what you can? And I think we just like, and we champion and go, that's all right. And I mean, Lord knows the rate of inflation and everything else right now.
So you think that if you saw someone who was like, you'd be able to tell if someone who was working as hard as they possibly could, but couldn't provide.
Yeah.
You'd know the difference between that and someone who is slothful and isn't able to provide.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? How would you know?
I mean, I think the honest thing is like, are they working or not?
Okay.
Right. Are they not just like, I'm working a few hours, like, but they're doing their best. I mean, let's say you've got someone, they're working 40, 50 hours a week to try to provide for their family. Like they're trying, right? Versus someone that is not working at all, or someone that is just simply choosing, hey, I'm going to live off of government assistance, or I'm going to live off of mom and dad, or I'm going to live off of, the charity of this organization, or like when you're just choosing to live off of other people or things because you're choosing
the taxpayer.
Yeah. I mean, like at some point you just got to call that for what it is. And, like
we're getting comments.
Don't be slothful, right?
There's no way around it.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Comment away. Like because we do know we have to, I mean, all right. I'm just going to go ahead and just jump here.
All right, go for it.
All right. So,
do I need to ask a question?
No, don't even ask a question.
All right.
All right. In 2 Thessalonians.
Okay.
And because I know this is where people, I just want to be very clear about what Paul says here.
And Thessalonians, do not take government assistance, so help you God.
Chapter 3, verse 10. So, in fact, when we were with you, this is what we commanded you. If anyone isn't willing to work, he should not eat.
That's straightforward.
And I think we just have to say that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't say that if they're working, that they shouldn't be able to eat.
Okay.
Right? So in other words, hey, church family, come around them, help them.
Okay.
Like we do that as a church family. Like we know people that are, whether they're in our church or in our community, and we know they're trying, they're working, they're doing the best they can, or maybe also they just get laid off and they're out of work for a month, but it wasn't, they got laid off because of an industry shutting down or whatever, or the company shut down. Okay, let's help them. Because it's not their choice to not work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's for those that are just saying, you know what, I'm just not going to work. I'm not going to do it.
So what about people who were given a bunch of money?
Oh, man.
Like if I won the lottery and chose not to work, say that.
Yeah.
It didn't come from anybody who worked. It's just I won the lottery.
Right.
So am I lazy? Am I sloth?
I think it depends.
Or did I work by playing the lottery?
No, you didn't work by playing the lottery.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
I mean, I had to fill a thing out.
I know. Good for you. All right. So I think that I think that when you have, all right, let's say you inherited a bunch of money or you won the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you got all this money. I would hope that you would still ask, Lord, what do you want me to do? Not do with the money, but what do you want me to do now?
Oh,
And
like with my life.
with my life.
Okay.
Because if it's, well, I've got all the money I need for the rest of my life, I'm just going to sit around and
Mm-hmm.
do nothing. That's being slothful.
Okay.
Yeah. You can have $100 million in the bank account because of inheritance or because of winning lottery and be slothful.
Okay, so this one is interesting because I do not think that I have ever heard any pastor or church talk about this by itself
Okay.
without putting it in a you need to go knock on more doors and make more Christian people
Okay.
context.
Gotcha.
So why?
Yeah.
Because all the other ones I'm like,
Yeah, you've heard.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I've heard or I definitely haven't heard and I know why.
Right.
But this one I don't know why. Like,
Yeah.
why is this not a thing?
When you asked the question, I mean, when I was looking at it on the notes, I was like, man, you're right. I've never heard a sermon on this. And I've actually never, this is actually, I can only remember teaching Proverbs 6 one time. And
You read that one earlier?
yeah, the one about the ant.
Okay.
And look at the way the ant works, da da da. And that was actually for a children's lesson, for a children's class I was teaching. And that was like the verse for that lesson. And so, but I was sitting there thinking about it. I was like, I think that's the only time I've ever taught this. I've actually never taught it from the pulpit, and I've never heard it taught from the pulpit. Now, I've heard it in the context of like, don't be spiritually apathetic. Like I've heard that, like, don't be spiritually apathetic. Okay. But in the sense of like just being straightforward about, hey, you need, like, don't be slothful, work, care for your kids. And maybe you hear things around that or whatever, but like not just people just calling people out for being lazy. Like I don't really remember hearing the word lazy too much from the pulpit. Again, except for in like spiritual context.
Right. That's how I've heard it.
Yeah. So I agree with you. So probably need to change that.
Is this like is it not a hard topic, but like even when I sent the notes, you had trouble defining it and figuring out what it meant.
Yeah.
And so is it just a hard thing to talk about? Or does the pastor or whoever not want to
deal with it?
Get on people for being lazy?
Yeah. Well, I think if you're preaching, like, so for example, if you're preaching mostly from New Testament, you don't run across this a whole lot.
Okay.
So you could preach all the Gospels and never really get into the idea of slothfulness.
Okay.
There is one verse in Matthew where Jesus is teaching he's using a parable, and in that parable, he tells a servant, don't be slothful. But that's it. In all the Gospels, is one.
Was Jesus ever slothful?
No.
Not even when he took a nap for 3 days?
All right, we're going to do some deeper theological work on what happened between the death and the resurrection.
Okay.
Yes, I'm not going to get into all that right now. No, he was not taking a nap for 3 days. Just putting it out there, he was not doing that. Okay. All right. And so, but no, he was not slothful. He rested on the Sabbath, but that's very different than being slothful.
So did God after he made everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually, so he rested on the seventh day. And actually, it's one of the 10 Commandments to observe the Sabbath. And so we are actually called
How do you do that?
To have a day of rest.
The Sabbath is an abstract idea. How do you observe it?
Well, it is for us. It wasn't for the Jews.
Oh.
It was very concrete. It was from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday.
Okay.
It was basically the equivalent of a 24-hour day.
Still.
Observe, yeah.
Okay.
If you're an Orthodox Jew, you observe Sabbath.
Okay.
And Sabbath is a day of rest, but not just resting from physical work. It's a day of celebrating the goodness of God and providing for you as well.
So what if you lived near the North Pole? Would you just never observe Sabbath because there's no sundown?
Okay. So if you lived in a place, Nate, that was like that, you would have your own ways of identifying a 24-hour
You'd have
window.
Basically like 6 months of Sabbath.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm not saying that. It's a 24-hour
That'd be a long rest.
window. Long rest.
Any slothfulness there?
And probably so if you're resting that long.
Right.
But yeah, so that's a 24-hour window where I've called to rest. And I think even as Christians today, we should realize we need a day like that where we are resting, or the Lord would not have called us to that from point one. Like, he knew it was best for us. Like, our bodies need a break, in other words. And I get that you're dealing in that time period with a lot more physical labor. And so the body resting from that physical labor was important. But I think it's more than just the physical part. I think it's the emotional, mental, spiritual body. I think it's all tied together, where we actually need just a day of just rest.
Okay.
Once a week.
How will being a sloth affect my life?
How will it affect your life?
Yeah.
All right. So
like, what's going to happen? What's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst?
If I take 5, if I don't work for 5 more minutes.
Right. Well, but that's different, working 5 more minutes, as opposed to just how is being slothful affecting my life.
If I take too long of a lunch, what's going to happen?
All right. I'm moving that away from it as well. If you're just choosing, right, to not work, all right, you're just being lazy, all right? All right. So let me read the fuller context of 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. All right. And I'll give context before I read the passage. What's going on in Thessalonians is they're believing that Jesus' coming is happening any minute now. Okay?
Why do they believe that?
Because of the idea of the Lord's returning.
Because they were lazy and didn't want to do anything?
Okay. Well, it leads to being lazy.
Okay.
And so they believe his coming is happening like any moment. All right?
Okay.
Therefore, they've stopped working.
Yeah.
They've just cashed it in. And they're like, well, he's coming back anytime anyway. We're just going to wait on it. All right. And this is what Paul says to them. I'm going to begin in verse 6. Now we command you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, to keep away. This is what it says, to keep away from every brother or sister who is idle and does not live according to the tradition you received from us. For you yourselves know how you should imitate us. We were not idle among you. We did not eat anyone's food free of charge, and instead we labored and toiled, working night and day, so that we would not be a burden to any of you. It's not that we don't have the right to support, but we did it to make ourselves an example to you so that you would imitate us. So, for example, here, Paul is a tent maker. And so he had this, and when they were there in Thessalonica, he established this tent making, basically like company. And that, and
what was it called?
I don't know. Paul's Tents. I don't know.
Paul's Tents LLC.
Yeah, I don't know. And so they established this way of working for he and for those that were with him. That's how they earned money. Okay. So they worked so they could provide for themselves. And so, because it says they didn't want to be a burden to any of you. We didn't eat anyone's food free of charge. Verse 10. In fact, when we were with you, this is what we commanded you. If anyone isn't willing to work, he should not eat. For we hear that there are some among you who are idle. They are not busy, but busybodies. Now we command and exhort such people by the Lord Jesus Christ to work quietly and provide for themselves. But as for you, brothers and sisters, do not grow weary in doing good. And if anyone does not obey our instruction in this letter, take note of that person. Don't associate with him, so that he may be ashamed. Yet don't consider him an enemy, but warn him as a brother. And So Paul's obviously pretty serious about this. He's like, hey, idleness is not healthy. Idleness is not good.
That's because he was going to lose his whole company.
No, not talking about his company at this point. They've left. They're gone.
Oh.
At this point.
Okay.
He's writing back to them, to the believers there who've stopped working and saying, listen, guys, we worked when we were there. You need to work when you're there. We worked so that we could have food and not just get it free of charge. You need to work so you can have food and not get it free of charge from somebody else. Work. And again, Paul is all for caring for those, for the widows, for the orphans, for those that are actually in need.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not saying you don't provide charity for people. He's not saying for those that are elderly, for those that are disabled, for those that are actually in need of assistance, that you don't help them. He's not saying that at all. He's saying if you are able to, then you need to work. And he goes on to say, and I love this part of, they weren't busy. They become busybodies. They become, you know, nosing in into everybody else's business and stirring up stuff. And so instead of actually,
so they're putting their energy in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so, in the way that it actually, when you ask the question, you know, what's the problem with it and how does it affect our life? Again, I think the problem with it is we've been told, hey, if you don't work, you don't eat. If you don't, if you become idle.
That seems pretty simple.
Yeah.
Like,
no brainer, right? Yeah. Or if you become idle, what you'll do is you'll become a busybody. And the next thing you know, you're into gossip and you're into sin. So actually idleness can lead to sin.
The what is the phrase? Idle hands are the devil's
tools
or whatever,
something like that. Yeah. And it's not, I mean,
is that from the Bible?
Not that exact quote.
Okay.
And then we can go back to Proverbs chapter 6 and in verse 10, and it says this, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest, and your poverty will come like a robber, your need like a bandit. Now listen, people can get into poverty in various ways, not because of their own choosing, but because, again, they get laid off or something happens, you unfortunately have a health issue and it racks up truckloads of medical bills and debt. Anyway, there's a lot of reasons people can become impoverished. But he's saying here, if it's because of slothfulness, can actually lead you into poverty. And so that's, again, how it's directly impacting our lives. Or if we have kids, it's impacting their lives as well. The problem, again, with slothfulness is it's not just what it ends up harming us in these physical ways, but then we're actually in sin because we're actually not doing what the Lord's called us to do with, again, working and fulfilling the purposes of God for our lives that He's prepared for us. God doesn't want us just laying around doing nothing or just becoming gossips. That's not what He would want for us either.
What is the opposite of sloth? Is there a opposite?
Of being lazy?
Yes. Like if I'm trying to be in the middle and work enough,
right,
but not kill myself,
right?
What is the other end of the
spectrum?
What is the other end? That was your word at the beginning, so
yeah, it was.
Yeah. What's the other thing called?
Workaholic.
Okay,
I think that's probably what it's called.
Is that a sin?
Yes,
it is.
I think if it's to the neglect of other things and other people.
Okay.
In other words, there's a lot of times a workaholic it's a sin because it's actually an addictive part to them as well.
Okay.
So there's in other words, something else is controlling your life. Anytime someone else or anything else is controlling us, it's not good.
Okay.
It's not healthy. But I think in this case, when you're talking about a workaholic as opposed to someone who's slothful, is that a workaholic is just, they're spending all of their energy and all of their time in working, and they are neglecting other things. They're probably neglecting their spiritual life, neglecting family. They're just work.
Okay.
And we weren't made for that. And I know there's people who are like that, that just, and honestly, they love it. It's almost like an adrenaline rush for them, you know, or maybe it's a dopamine rush, you know, that they have this sense of, man, work just creates this satisfaction, you know. But again, when you're doing that and it's to the neglect of people, the neglect of family, the neglect of the Lord, that's obviously problematic.
Okay, so like you said earlier, sloth seems like a mindset that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you took a person who has tea at 10:15 from another country,
right,
and brought them over here and said, you need to get to work, no more tea, that would be pretty drastic change for that person.
Sure.
I mean, amongst all the other things.
Right.
But if you took someone that was used to that type of work and said, no, you have to work 8 straight hours without stopping,
right,
that would be a hard transition.
Sure it would.
So, how do I stop being a sloth?
All right. How do you stop being a sloth?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if I want to say that person who's coming into this situation is now therefore slothful.
I'm just saying that as an example, because that would seem like a hard thing to do.
Right.
So if I'm used to not working and having if I'm used to not working and having other people provide for me and all of that.
Yeah. Okay.
That seems like a hard change. And And also,
sure.
How do I fix it?
It is a hard change, right?
Yeah.
Because now you've gotten used to other people caring for you, you know, that I don't have to work. I don't have to do things I don't like. And so I think a lot of it is, you know, like going to the Lord and saying, Lord, I need to die to myself because
Okay.
Lord, I need you to give, I need a grace, Lord, to do the things that I really actually in my flesh don't want to go do, but I know that I need to do. And so I think there's always parts for us involved in work of things, man, we don't love it. We don't like it, but I can't just go, well, I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm just not going to do it because I don't care. I don't like this. Therefore I'm out. Well, no, that's not the way this works. We have to work. We have to do the things that we don't like to do. So I think in light of that, you're fighting a lot of your inner self, and that's what I'm saying. That part needs to die. And I don't know how else you do that other than going, Lord, I need you to kill this selfish part of me that has become so dependent on others that I will not work for myself or for my family. And so I think that, I think it's just going to the Lord and asking for his help. And now I will say too, that when you get around people who have healthy work ethics, that you begin to see what that looks like and you begin to see the reward of that. And I think that's something that can grab hold of us too and say, all right, I'm learning how to work. I'm learning what it looks like to have a work ethic if that's never been modeled for me before.
Okay.
And so I think getting around people that have healthy work ethics are really important as well. But as far as that mindset, to me, it really is just like, man, Lord, I need you to transform the way I think about work and about self. It's interesting, and we really haven't hit this in the episode, but one of the ideas of sloth and slothfulness is actually self-pity.
Okay.
And so when you look into like what it is to be slothful, is to have self-pity. And I think when we have self-pity, when we're just, an over-exaggerated point of this, of self-pity, kind of woe is me kind of thing, we tend to not want to go and do. We tend to want to just let other people care for us, and I think that has to change as well. I think it has to go, Holy Spirit, this is not okay. It's not right. because self-pity is actually a really high focus on self. And so it's just, Lord, I need to not focus so much on myself and focus on the fact that I need to care for myself, care for others, provide, and do what you call me to do.
So what about the other one? What about the other end of your spectrum?
Or the workaholic?
Yeah, how do I fix that?
I think you need to ask, why do I feel the need to work this much?
Okay.
Some people may come into it honestly, and by that I mean they feel like they've got to work those 60 to 80 hours, maybe at 2 different jobs
So some people
to provide. Yeah, sure. And so, but I think over the long haul, like if I'm doing that 7 days a week, like that's not sustainable over the long haul. And so I think it's like, all right, Lord, what does it look like for me to work to like, it's one thing if I have to do it, right? It's another thing that I'm choosing to do it.
Right.
And I think that's the idea of a sloth or idea of a workaholic. It's like the sloth is choosing to be lazy.
Okay.
The workaholic is choosing to go work this much. Now, again, it may be because of a dopamine rush or an adrenaline rush, or they're now addicted to it, or they're addicted to the idea of the reward from it, right? The extra money, the perks, whatever it may be. Or the value, or this, some people just get a sense of gratification and from it. They feel really good about themselves. Look how much I worked.
Or they like what they're doing.
Yeah, or they genuinely like I know someone who's a workaholic and they genuinely love what they do. But they're working 6 to 7 days a week. But when you do that, you can't help but neglect other areas of your life. And I think that's where it all becomes really problematic. Like it was one thing when I was single and I was, and you're working, 60 hours a week.
Because you could be either one when you're single, and it doesn't matter.
I mean,
sort of.
Yeah.
Comparatively to other people.
Right. Sure. And so like when I was single and I'm working like 60 hours a week, like, okay.
Yeah.
No big deal. But now that I'm married and have 3 kids, if I'm working that much on a regular basis, something's being neglected in the midst of that.
Okay.
And so,
are you neglecting nothing when you're single? Like if I was 23,
right,
and was either working just enough or working 24/7,
right?
Does it matter?
I think it matters if you're neglecting your own self and your own self-care.
Okay.
And I think it matters if you're neglecting the Lord.
Okay.
And pursuing Him. I think it matters on those fronts. But again, when you're single, you can work a lot of hours. I don't think it's healthy, right? To do it just for. I don't think it's healthy to do it for just a really long extended period of time. Like again, I get it because I know even people who have kids and those kind of things, like they're having to work a lot of hours for whatever reason. Okay, to make sure that they provide for their family. Man, I get that. And I applaud that. So that's why this whole conversation, I think this is why it's so nuanced and hard, right? This is why this topic is so hard to speak and talk about.
So it's basically like how much responsibility you have.
Yeah.
You need to meet your responsibilities.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's a great way of phrasing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not go too far one way or the other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at least meet them.
At least meet, the best to the best that you can.
Okay.
Meet them. Yeah. I think that's a great way of phrasing it. I don't know if we answered really anything.
I think we didn't. But thank God it's over, so I can go back to bed.
Right. You can return to being slothful.
Well, this has been the When I Heard This Podcast. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast, and X and Twitter at When I Heard This. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download, tell your friends about the show. That was fun. You can follow me at Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinsoff, and you can follow Joseph on Instagram at
Rev Joe T.
This has been the Winner Heard This podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.